Today, Becker is speaking with Fraser MacFarlane from Flinders International. Fraser has been involved in the live export of stud cattle for several decades. This interview is brought to you by the Australian Brahman Breeders Association in recognition of the 75th year since the formation of the association on the 7th of October 1946. The association and the breed continues to thrive and grow, and many of these stories, past and present, should be recorded for future generations to enjoy.
My guest is Fraser McFarlane. Fraser is the owner of Flinders International, which is a company that live exports cattle to Asia, mainly into Thailand, and he's going to tell us of his adventures, his mishaps, and the fun that he's had along the way in the live export industry. Good afternoon, Fraser. Welcome.
Hello, Kay. Nice to be here.
That's great. Fraser, the live export industry, I guess, in the world of agriculture is probably one of the newer parts of it. When, where, why and how did Fraser McFarlane decide that that was the road that he thought he'd like to take?
What's that famous old saying, you can't help bad luck?
Sure, it wasn't all bad luck.
It's been very good luck. Back in the in about 1988, I ended up in Thailand working for Gunneral Management as a nutrition pastures forage bloke for a large dairy farm. And that went on for about a year. And then I came home for a while, and then I went back up there to work for Ostrix, who had a large commercial Brahman contract to send Brahman heifers to Thai farmers. So I got involved. My job with Ostrix back then was I looked after the quarantine in Thailand, and then in between receiving shipments, I'd go out and help the farmers establish pastures and help them with some of their problems. But that project was called the Green Nissan project, and it went on for about a year, 1989 to 1990, and Ostrix put about 10,500 commercial Brahman heifers in. We do about 1,500 a shipment, and every couple of months we take a boatload in. So that kept me going for nearly a year. And then at the same time, then there were a couple other exporters put Brahmans in. There was about probably another 6,000 went in through John Montague from Quality Livestock and Don Moyle from Basin Exports. So that was Thai government had a pretty keen policy to help their cattlemen build up. Most of the cattle went to the northeast area, which was the poorer region of the country, and they sort of saw it as a good way to boost the sort of the economic base of the village, of the farmers.
So Fraser, where did you draw? Back in those days, you would have gone to someone and said, "We want to export some of your cattle."
Yep.
Mainly. I guess, were they breeding cattle? Were they male cattle? And
they were all young, pretty much true to type commercial pure Brahman heifers, all breeder heifers for that particular project. And I think back at the time, Ostrix, I think they had a deal with Primac to find all the cattle.
Yep.
But a couple of the main blokes involved, finding them and selecting was David Peddle and a bloke we'd known in the Brahman industry today, Darren Kent.
Yep.
He had a fair bit to do with finding those heifers.
Yeah. And so did you meet much opposition? Primac did the legwork, but no doubt over the time you built relationships with producers who provided their cattle into those markets. And like I said, it was a fairly new idea, a fairly new thought process, I guess, for certainly for a lot of Queenslanders. It may have been not so strange to people in the territory, but it was a new concept to us. Certainly in the late 80s. Did you meet much resistance, or did you have to do a lot of explaining to people?
No, that it was pretty easy going in that part of it. There wasn't the animal welfare issues back then. and I think most producers were pretty keen for the new market.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't know because exactly, but I think live exports started quite a long time ago, but only small numbers. And even at that stage, there was still quite a few feeder steers going to Indonesia or the Philippines. But probably, other than, there were breeder cattle projects going in other Southeast Asian countries at the same time or a bit earlier, like to Kalimantan in Indonesia. There was the government would import Brahman heifers to disseminate amongst farmers, and same to the Philippines, and same to into Malaysia, mainly Sarawak and Sabah.
Yep.
It was fairly new, but pretty easy to put together. Probably what we were doing with ours, we were getting 5 cows per farmer, and there'd be sort of a farmer group representative come out and select the cattle, and that was a bit problematic because you sort of, you couldn't have too much picking and choosing going on.
No.
And when they get the other end, and the farmers would come and get their own 5, they try and sort of bully to pick the eyes out. So we had a few interesting moments in the early days of distribution.
and so, that in itself would have been an amazing experience. Someone turns up to pick up five head. How did they arrive? We don't have images of Fraser's transport turning up and loading up a deck of heifers and trundling off.
Oh yeah, I just covered the easy transport was from the ship to the quarantine. We'd probably have we'd have about 100 body trucks organised. Mm-hmm. And they're just more like a cargo truck that had high sides and a drop-down tailgate. And we put about a foot of sand in the floor, and so that was the grip for the cattle. And then when the tailgate only come about halfway up the sides. So when they fill them, they put about 3 or 4 bamboo. They make bamboo pipes that they put through up higher and bind them on with hemp rope. Mm-hmm. And they drive forward a bit and then flick the tailgate up. And then after they bound the bamboo pipes with the hemp rope, they pour a bucket of water on so the rope would even shrink and hold it even tighter. So they'd head off to the quarantine, and there'd be me and there'd be 2 young fellas stockmen on the ship. One of them would head up with me to beat them to quarantine, because what we did there was, one thing you've got to do taking them to those countries, they need a vaccination for foot and mouth disease. Mm-hmm. So we'd vaccinate them straight off the truck. So we'd be up in the bush before the ship came getting ready. Then we'd drive down to Bangkok and we'd have a night on the town.
That'll be a story for another day.
20 odd trucks, and then we'd drive back up, and it was a little bit of hard work getting to the quarantine before the trucks were there.
Yep. And so, how long was quarantine in Thailand?
It was 30 days, which sort of didn't make a lot of sense, but anyway, it probably gave them. It was probably beneficial that the cattle got used to people, because our cattle aren't that used to people, and when they get to their farm, they're handled, they get a halter on, and they're hand fed every day, so they sort of become domesticated pretty quickly. But so that extra 30 days of handling did tame them down enough that the farmers didn't have so much trouble handling them when they got them home. But yeah, talking about when they picked them up, well, they'd come in all sorts of trucks. One little, they have what they call an E-tan. It's more or less a homemade truck. They'll get a regular Hilux Ute sort of chassis, and they'll take the body off it, and they'll put a homemade cabin in the front and a longer tray on it. So they'd turn up and they'd take 5 in them. Some of them there'd be 3 farmers together and get like a regular body truck. And yeah, we'd be you'd run out 5 and they'd go on, and you run another 5 and they'd go on. But the first. That wasn't the first day. It was one distribution day. One of the leaders of a large group of farmers, he got out there early before we got to the yards, and he went in and drafted up all the picks for his group. And he had them there, and my boss, Steve Ellison, turned up, and Steve said, "What's going on here?" And he worked at Esses. No, he just opened the gate and put all those straight back into the big mob. And this poor bloke, he didn't know what to do. So, but I'll tell you a funny story. Steve, before the first day of distribution, the first shipment, he went out to the province and the farmers were all there for a meeting, and he said to them, "Look, these cattle are a bit different to what you're used to. They got a bit of speed. They'll run a bit." And then these Thai farmers said, "Oh, yeah, mate, we know how to look after cattle. We know what we're doing. We've been doing it all our life." Anyway, rightio. So the next day they come up and pick up the cattle, and they put, while in the truck, they put a little rope holder on, like a bit of thin rope around behind the ears and through the nose, and make a halter with a fairly long sort of lead on it. And some of them, they jump them out of the truck, and it's about 100 or 500 metres walk down to their yards.
Oh, my God.
And they thought they're going to lead them down. And no joking, they're off there with these cattle. I jump out, and they're trying to walk down the paddy bund of the rice fields, and literally they're more or less water skiing behind the cattle going across the rice paddies. So they came back the next day, and they got the Thai guy, the translators, said, "Ask that old bloke, what's the word in English to make the cattle stop?" Because their cattle, the way they train them, they do listen to you. They tell them to go left or right or stop or go. And Steve scratched his head and he said, "Shit, nothing." Now these blokes go home and they try the word nothing. And it didn't work. So they came back the next day and says, "Where's that lying bastard?"
So, that was... The cattle were going, I guess, for the uninitiated, these 5 head were going into a family farm, for the want of a better word, to improve their lifestyle. Were they then used for work in the rice paddies? Were they used for breeding? Were they fattened and sent to market?
Purely as breeders, to produce young cattle to sell. Yeah. Or keep the better females themselves, but yeah, purely as a commercial breeder herd base. And success was in varying degrees. One of the problems was that, because it was a program that the Agricultural Bank funded, and so each farmer took out a soft loan to buy the 5 cattle. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty good deal, and a lot of non-farmers got on the bandwagon and wangled to get to get some cattle. Mm-hmm. And these fellas just, they'd hire a kid to look after them, and they just didn't appreciate, how much feed it took, what was involved to look after a bigger and better cow. Mm-hmm. So the success varied from poor to very good, depending on who got the cattle.
Yep. And so did you ever end up in a situation where you ended up, with them back because someone said, this is not what we thought it was. We thought it was going to be a get-rich-quick scheme, and that didn't happen. No. And so Austrac, we've got these cattle back.
It did happen. It became a bit of a political football, because it was the project was the initiative of the army, and the main army leader at the time, who became a politician. The opposition turned it into a bit of a political football, and they lobbied and mobbed a lot of farmers to return their cattle in protest that they reckoned they weren't doing the job right. Yep. So there was probably there was over the 10,500, there was probably a couple of thousand came back to the government. Mm-hmm. But in that, actually, probably 20% weren't actually the cattle they bought. They substituted local cattle for them. Yeah. And so that actually led on to my second job in Thailand, was working for AMLC. I got they sort of, AMLC was pretty active in those days in helping establish markets and have in-country assistance for the customers. Mm-hmm. And so I had spent 9 months up there helping the Department of Livestock sort of rehabilitate these cattle and get them back in calf and get them ready for resale.
Yep.
Which we did, and we did a good job. In the 9 months, 96% were in calf or had a calf.
Yep.
And the real cattle, they were queuing up to buy them.
Yeah.
So, look, depending how you look at the project, it might have seemed to be a failure that farmers returned the cattle, but they were sort of pushed into that by the political persuasion.
Yeah.
But in terms of helping the national genetic base of the herd, it really did a lot of good.
Yeah. The Brahman breed, why do you think they chose that? Clearly, we, as Brahman breeders, we like to think that they're the best and the most suitable for the tropical northern climates, all of the things that are trotted out. Is that the case in the environment of Thailand?
100% the same thing. It's more or less like having, running cattle from sort of where they were going from Townsville north.
Yep.
Probably the nutrition varies. Overall, if they're not diligent, they do have periods of nutritional stress. But the good ones had good pastures, good improved pastures, and the thing about that part of the world is a lot of like crop byproducts or food processing byproducts that become stock feed that are very affordable. So, these blokes they grow a little bit of an acre of irrigated tropical grass. And they collect some rice straw and they get a bit of rice bran and some cassava chips, and they can do a pretty good job on the cattle.
Yep. Yep.
But certainly for the heat and humidity, it pretty much has to be a Brahman or a high Brahman content cow anyway.
Yeah.
These days there's a fair bit of crossbreeding in over those to get feeder cattle. But yeah, no, just pretend you're in North Queensland. That's the environment, and that's why they've got to be Brahman.
Yep. So AMLC days ended, and then what was happened? What was the future for Fraser then?
Yeah, well, I've got to recall the time frame, but it was about 1996 where we started our own export company, Flinders.
Yep.
So after that, when we finished that Green Nissan project and the rehabilitation of the cattle, I probably had a couple of years back home. It all went pretty quiet. And then we started getting a bit of inquiry from people who got to know up there wanting to import cattle themselves.
Yep.
And so that's I got involved sort of working for myself, not Austrix then, but just on a small scale.
Yep. So as you say, small scale. I guess there's got to be a number, I guess, for you to be able to make some money and go into it. How did you get started? Was it just through the contacts that you'd made through your previous, or did you? There was a lot of groundwork involved in that.
Yeah, we actually got started in the exporting. It wasn't actually to Thailand. We through some family contacts. A friend of ours was good friends with the chairman of the CEO of Indo Milk in Indonesia, and his buddy, the chairman of the Union of Dairy Cooperatives, was looking for sort of a reliable supplier of dairy cattle out of Australia. So they came to us and talked us into starting Flinders, and we were actually shipping up dairy cattle for a couple of years to Indonesia. And during that time, that's when I started getting inquiry from Thailand, from our connections there. So we were probably flying up, 3 or 4 shipments a year of, anything from 5 semen donor bulls to go to the government AI semen collecting centre to, 70 or 40 or 70 head of stud heifers for different people.
Yep. So I guess, that's my next question. Why Thailand as opposed to Indonesia or the Philippines, Vietnam? Thailand has sort of been the base?
Well, I think Thailand, Indonesia was we did a lot in Indonesia for those years of dairy cattle. Then the dairy importation went off for a while. The government policy changed and they stopped, they just had a policy of some soft loans for the cooperatives.
Yep.
Then we also did digress a bit. We got involved with Malaysian feedlotter, and we did a couple of ships of feeder cattle we fattened in a joint venture in Johor Bahru. And that sort of, it just sort of, it worked all right, but it sort of, the economics of fattening them there just was hard work with all the imported Indian meat. By then the Indian meat coming in was getting a bigger quantities, and it was just, it became pretty tough going for the feedlotters in Indonesia fattening Australian cattle to make it work.
Yeah. So, in your early days, it was to import cattle for 5 head to get people up and running. When you started Flinders, was that the same sort of market you were looking at, or were you into large scale then, or, into feeder cattle, into feedlots to feed the nation, or what part of that live export industry did you delve into then?
Pretty much it was the 5 cattle per family projects. They were big projects, and they were government backed projects, and on my own steam, they were really too big for me to really take on. That need to be companies like Ostrix to do them. So mainly that's why I got involved with more the stud cattle, Brahman cattle mainly, just small numbers.
And so in the stud stuff, back into Thailand, is it both male and female cattle that you do, or are you still just...
Mostly heifers, but pretty much the last sort of 15 years we've probably supplied most of the semen donor bulls to the Thai government. They've mostly been, that they've imported. They've been importing Angus and Charolais to produce semen for the blokes doing crossbreeding. They have a large Brahman semen donor herd, but they pick them mostly through their own breeding programs of their own cattle.
So does that involve you bringing Taiwanese, officials down here to look at cattle, or do they just take it all on your... Plenty
of that, both government and our customers, but also government officials. When we've worked closely with the live animal exports in Canberra and Biosecurity in Canberra and Live Corp and MLA to work on protocols. The main one being we had to get was to actually get a feeder steer protocol going. And in that we'd done a fair bit of work over years between MLA and Ostrix and myself with the Thais about. We did some feeder steer trials and they were pretty happy with the results. And then we just spent time. We were running seminars to get the local cattlemen on side, because early on when we were talking about feeder steers, the Thai Beef Cattle Association was very much against it. So Ostrix sent up 100 steers on a ship to Johor Bahru, and then we trucked them through to Thailand to one private feedlot, and then for half there and half of them I ran a trial in a government breeding station. And after that we just ran a lot of series of seminars and got everyone along to it, and through that process they relaxed and became pretty comfortable with allowing feeder steers to come in. So, and then the final straw, eventually we had to bring out the Thai veterinary officials to sort of be comfortable with the sensible feeder steer protocol.
So talk us through the process, Fraser, of how did you, coming back, doing your own thing and working in the stud world, people who go to the time, effort, energy and money to breed stud cattle of either male or female are pretty cautious, wanting, protective of where their cattle go and what ends up happening to them. So did you sort of pull together a group of people and go, I've got this this program, this business opportunity to put to you? Or did you go to Brahman breeders and say, can you point me in the direction of some stud breeders who you think would be interested in this? Or did you have a certain criteria of stud cattle that you thought I'm going to need for this to work?
It probably depended. It worked a couple of ways. depending whether the importer wanted me to find the cattle and send them, or they wanted to come out and find their own ones, buy their own ones. You know, we do a bit of both. Sometimes they'll come out with their own selection. Sometimes I'll find them for them.
Yeah.
But probably mostly, you know, we got help from ABA, Brahman Breeders Association, about putting us in touch with Brahman breeders, and then pretty quickly we got to know a fair few.
Yeah.
And it's not being critical, but it can be a lot of frustration, and it takes a while for sort of things to be confirmed, and you've got to be a special person to tolerate some of the to tolerate the process.
Yeah.
Some people just couldn't be. You know, it's just more trouble than it's worth to them. You know, you'll run them in and you'll take photos, and then they'll and they'll and then you'll wait a while, and then they'll want them, and it's too late. And so it's not everybody's cup of tea to sort of have the patience to work with some of these importers.
Yeah. And so do the Thais have, you know, I know if you're going to put cattle on a boat, as they say now, to go to the feeder market, you know, someone comes out and assesses them and, it's got too much hair, it's too black, it's too grey, it's too red, it's too big, it's too small. You know, there's a million criteria that you seem to have to be able to tick the boxes for to get on the boat. Is it similar with the stud deal?
Oh, yeah, very much more so. The Thais have got one real thing about the Brahmins. They can't have any pink pigmentation. They can't have a pink lip. They can't have any white hairs in their tail brush. So you always got to be. Occasionally, you forget to look closely at that, and there'll be a slight bit of pink on the bottom of the lip, and you'll be in trouble for picking that one.
Yeah. So do they take reds or only greys?
Oh, it's probably mostly greys these days, but you know, they certainly like the good greys they find here.
Yep.
Look, it's the more what's the word? The better Thai Brahman breeders can see the merit in what Australia's done with the Brahman breed.
Mm-hmm.
They quickly identify that through the natural selection and the nature of the Australian stud industry and how relevant it is to producing good, better, improved commercial cattle, they identify how well we've taken the breed in Australia.
Yep.
But we still, you know, we had it good there for many years under mad cow disease that the Yanks couldn't put them in.
Yep. Probably
about 5 or 6 years ago, they talked a way around that, and oh, geez, they're good salesmen.
Yeah, amongst other things, yes.
But I will say one thing about the Thai stud, the cattle Brahman fellas. They have a very good eye for picking their cattle.
Yep.
And they have a very good nature and manner to get up to work with cattle. They, you know, pretty much I like to let them pick them because they know exactly what they want.
Yeah, yep. So again, in that, you know, when you've been making contacts with producers to go into this market, do you only, you know, because of the geographics, look for producers in the north, or is it now that they've accepted the Brahman breed for what it is, so it doesn't matter whether you're a Brahman producer out of, you know, mid New South Wales now, where it's cool and they've not cracked the tufts?
I mean, well, we'll probably, you know, we do draw a fair few out of northern New South Wales.
Yep.
And you know, it sort of works. The less famous, you know, they don't know who's the more famous and who's the less famous brand here.
Yeah. So
we can get equal quality cattle that they like, that don't cost quite as much for them when they're coming from, you know.
Yeah.
The ones that aren't sort of, you know, flying the flag pretty hard and getting the bigger money at Brahman Week, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
It's been a good outlet for sort of, you know, young up and coming studs.
Yeah. So, you know, we're talking about price. Who sets the price? Do you say, okay, you go to Thailand and go, if you're going to want to buy, you know, Brahman stud heifers out of Australia, you've got to have the equivalent to 5,000 Australian dollars?
Yeah.
Or do the ties ring you and say, well, Fraser, we've got 3,000 Australian dollars, find them?
Yeah. It's sort of a bit of a trial and error thing, but they have a bit of an idea what the cattle sell for here.
Yeah.
It's through all the media and just through the sales. But pretty much we'll say, get an idea what sort of. I say, if you want to buy sort of run of the mill, in the mid range heifers, a couple of years ago I said you've probably got to spend 2,500. These days I'll probably say you've probably got to spend last year I said you've probably got to spend about 4,000. It'll be more this year.
Yeah.
And then when they come out and they go to beef or they go to sales, they can see it for themselves and they can decide if they want to go and chase some heifers at stud sales where they'll go up to 20,000, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
So I get an idea what they're looking for, and then I tell them what I think what that'll cost them to get.
Yep. And so now you've got the heifers in there. Do you see or do you trade in the male market or you leave that to someone else?
Sorry, with the bulls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, same with the thing there. Like we just sent 18 heifers and two young bulls, and one was a Brahman and one was actually a shorthorn bull.
Yep.
But he's going to an AI collection they'll use that to their contract breeders there to produce feeder steers for their feedlot.
Yep.
So same again there. We just get, I'll just ring up 2 or 3 or 4 breeders and say just pick out 2 or 3 bulls and take photos or a little video and I'll send them up and I'll let the buyer make his own mind up with a little bit of help from us.
Yeah. So
they're pretty good at picking, looking at it through a short video.
Yeah. Is it, considered to be a profession or a business of prestige in Thailand? So the ultimate people that are buying these cattle, are they, for the want of using Australian vernacular, well-heeled, or are they just run-of-the-mill graziers as you find all throughout Australia?
No, well, they're run-of-the-mill grazier there. He's a farmer with 5 to 25 cows, and he wouldn't be buying any from Australia.
Yep.
So they're pretty well-heeled, sort of, for want of a better description. They're hobby farmers in a sense. They've got a mainstream business, but their stud will be a genuine, very serious stud business. It's not just a pet. They do get pretty involved in it, and it means more than just having these nice cattle hanging around.
Yeah.
Then there are one of our families we've been supplying for a long time. They are 100% true cattlemen. They've got a feedlot. They've got a stud of about 300 head.
Yep.
And got some commercial breeders, and they are 100% producing like herd bulls to sell to sort of mid-range sort of village farmers.
Yeah.
Or bulls to other studs. But yeah, so most of the studs there, they're kind of a sideline to their mainstream business, which would be, there could be road builders or machinery dealers or in construction or those sort of things.
Yep. So over the years, I'm guessing there's been occasions where you've taken Australian producers to Thailand.
Yeah.
There must be some funny stories that you could tell about that. Have you got a couple you can share with us?
Oh, well, a couple there. We had a bit of trouble getting Caroline Briggs onto an elephant in Tory Round one time.
I can only imagine.
And then another time, I'm pretty shy, and a few of us were at the annual beef show, and there's one bloke up there. He actually imported drought masters, but his business is English language.
Mm-hmm.
This bugger got us up on stage and made us recite the Manchester River.
So who knew all the words?
Well, fortunately, he did. What else happened there? Some I can't tell you.
Some are probably best left unsaid.
There was Margaretta Morgan went up as the judge one year. It's been a tradition that ABBA will send the judge for the annual beef show.
Yes.
And we're back into Bangkok one night at the bar, and they had a bucking bull, a bull, So it got the better of us. We both had to ride it eventually. I think we were pretty sorry we did. I probably shouldn't have said that. I think I told I'd never tell anybody that.
I can only
But
imagine.
I tell you, back to when we were distributing the cattle, there was another time we took in a couple of hundred herd bulls, and the same little trucks, some big trucks, and there's this one truck backed in, and the three bulls sort of lined up side by side of the truck looking over the cabin, and the four blokes sitting in the front ready to start their engines, ready to take off from the loading ramp, and the middle bull decides to try and jump out of the truck, and he does a belly flop over the cab of the truck. And I was there, it's more or less their eyes just popped out of their head.
I'm sure they did.
So then about 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, all the little trucks started up and took off. About an hour later, a few big trucks came back in.
So now, you don't go up with every export anymore? You just sort of put them on the boat here or the plane here and say see you later, or you travel with them?
Up there, it's you need to keep in touch with them. I'd probably get up there 3 or 4 times a year just to counter the Yanks and to just see how everyone's going and iron out any problems.
Yeah.
It's making it tough at the moment with COVID not being able to get up there.
Yeah, no. They're a very loyal race of people, I guess, to do business with them. They are shrewd but fair business people is, what I'm told. Do you find them that way?
Yeah. No, but it's sometimes something doesn't go quite right. You just need to be able there to smooth the waters and get them back on side, and it's usually pretty good.
Yeah.
But in terms of moving the cattle there with planes, it's pretty safe without a stockman on the plane, but we like to send a stockman on the plane more so to be hands-on to when they're unloading, so they don't do anything, don't do the wrong thing, getting them from the air pens to the truck.
Yeah.
But fortunately, through the years of doing it, we've got pretty good people up there.
Mm-hmm. And so is it still a 30-day quarantine process?
Yeah. 30 days both ends for Thailand.
Yep.
Which is, it's a pity because it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
They need that. They just need probably, a week here to get settled in and one of the problems we got is the protocols and the testing, and Thailand's got a very long test requirement, and it's we're testing for diseases that they've got, and we shouldn't be. It's just costing the poor importing farmer extra money.
Yeah. I guess the elephant in the room was the banning of live export. What did that do for your relationships, and did it affect you because of the form of export you do, or did it?
It really didn't affect what we were doing. And I'd have to stop and think whether we flew cattle out during that ship ban. I probably did.
Yeah.
I'd have to think about that, but it certainly. If we were dealing in Indonesia, it wasn't good because it was a real slap in the face to the Indonesians what they did.
Yeah.
The Thais, they know enough about the world, and they could read through it to know what's going on.
Right.
But until it was, they knew what was going on. But it was, it didn't affect me like it did all the boat trade.
No.
And at that point, we had finished. We sort of got out of the boats because, it's a lot of money for a shipload of cattle, and the shipping rates went up and up, and it was just a bit too hard really for a small operator.
Yeah, it's definitely a game for the big boys and big numbers. Yeah. So what do you see as the future for your form of live export into Asia? Do you think it will continue to grow?
It goes in cycles a bit. We go up and down. At the moment, before COVID, it was pretty keen in Thailand. the breeders who were going, they were pretty active getting new breeders going to buy stock off them.
Mm-hmm.
The way we develop genetics in Australia, I think we'll always be sending genetics to that part of the world.
Yep.
We have, in recent times, we've been sending a lot more Wagyu.
Mm-hmm.
And they're interesting cattle. They've nearly got the attributes of a Brahman in terms of hardiness and surviving on low nutrition.
Yeah.
And they've certainly got terrific reproduction. So until you've got involved with Wagyus in the tropics, you'd think they wouldn't work, but they actually do go pretty well up there.
Yeah. So, do you think Brahmans, will remain the prominent breed up there, or will they? Once upon a time, that was all that we thought would survive in Northern Australia. We're now seeing Angus cattle, and we're seeing all sorts of cattle penetrate the north.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll happen up there?
The breeder business, we've sent a few, of all sorts of breeds up there, but pretty much in Thailand, they're still, majority are pure Brahman breeders.
Yep.
For the feeder cattle to the feedlots in Indonesia, they're taking more and more crossbred cattle.
Yeah.
But having said that, it's you can see by the development of the Brahman, like the Brahman genetics are so good today that a Brahman will match a crossbred animal in weight gains in a feedlot, and they'll still be a bit more efficient in feed conversion. So I think it's just it's supply of cattle a bit, and when they get short in the north, they come further south and they'll take more crossbred cattle. But I hope and I think it's true that it's just it's keeping the pressure on the commercial cattle in the north to see the value in improving buying better and better bulls to keep improving the genetics of the commercial herd.
Yeah. It's certainly, you would think, to the uninitiated, the Asian market to a degree is still an untapped market. There is a lot of them. Allegedly they're getting wealthier as time goes by. Their standards of living are improving. You would think that is going to be an untapped market, and certainly in what you're doing, you'd seem to think that would have.
The market's diverse too. Like there's certainly the majority of it is like Brahman cross cattle that have been fed through to a medium carcass size for their wet market or their supermarket trade.
Yeah.
But there's still that high end premium beef where they want Angus cross or they want Wagyu cross.
Mm-hmm.
There's diverse markets, but the majority of it is just that mainstream medium-sized sort of carcass animal that we grow in the northern half of Australia.
Yeah. So I guess that in itself is a little interesting. These people, the Thais are coming to Australia and buying, stud cows, stud heifers, so to speak,
Yep.
and then taking them up there and breeding from them, and then selling their progeny into meatworks, so to speak.
No, the progeny and the stud wouldn't go to meatworks. They'll just be going to new stud breeders or selling herd bulls out to commercial cattlemen.
Yep. Okay. Right.
A bit the trouble is that if they've got a stud cow that she isn't performing, they don't want to kill her. I think it's fed, even if she stops having calves, she still stays there. Or they'll sell it to some other unsuspecting poor coot that can't get a calf out of her.
Yeah, everyone always has a pet.
Yeah, I know. See, there's that traditional old Buddhist culture of not wanting to kill large animals.
Yeah.
So, I don't know the percentages, but the majority of the beef in Thailand is eaten by a minority.
Yeah. Yep. It's certainly, from the outside looking in, it looks like it's certainly a long-term business relationship that I guess certainly the Brahman breed will have with the Thais and indeed other parts of Asia. Do you see your business expanding outside of Thailand, or do you think that's as much as?
No, it's we do bits and pieces to other countries, but I think there's opportunity there, and I probably will, as I get a bit too old to be a farmer as well, I'll probably at the moment I'm focusing a bit more on exporting.
Yes, yep.
I think that China's the big market, but it's probably a bit too big a jump for me to be an exporter to China.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's also, and we do a bit of that, getting involved in projects up there, whether it's a feedlot project or it's a dairy project, with more the technical side of establishing farms.
Mm. Yeah.
There's a fair opening there if you can get there.
Yeah, that's the
the one thing that's not brought up in a lot of the debate about live export trade and feeder cattle is that probably 70% of the diet up there is byproducts from crops or food processing.
Mm-hmm.
So if that doesn't go into feeding cattle, it goes into organic matter, goes into methane up into the sky, and it's a pretty it's not good. Whereas you look at Australia, probably most of the feed here is 100% specifically grown for feedlotting.
Yeah.
So if you look at the carbon footprint, Asia is the one that should be fattening the cattle.
Yes. Yeah.
We should be breeding them here and fattening them up there for their consumption anyway.
Yeah. No, and that's certainly very much an issue of the day, isn't it? So there's lots of I guess in the future there is lots of business opportunity in that regard, and who knows what that future is going to look like.
Yeah, it's we've the long-term continuance of the live export trade. It's the government's a bit confused at the moment with cost recovery for their part of certification and licensing exporters and managing standards and it's the whole compliance and the whole standard process has become a lot too complicated and too involved with the authorities in Canberra and in the nowadays, they want to they want us to pay the cost for that, and it's really making it it's a burden that is not the industry can't really afford.
Yeah.
And they're doing a job that was for the better part was always being done well anyway.
Yeah.
They just need to re-look at the way they ensure that everything's been done above board by the old standards are fine. It's just ensuring they're done properly. And generally, there's very rare cases when things aren't done well. But we've got this, we've sort of been in a monstrosity of a bureaucracy going in Canberra that's just unaffordable.
Yeah. So when here you'd have to have an export licence and jump through a lot of hoops to maintain that, like you've just said, and it costs a lot of money. Yeah. When you are dealing, sending cattle into Thailand, are you dealing with an import agent, or are you dealing with Bill Smith, the farmer, who contacts Flinders International and says, I want to buy 100 Brahman heifers?
A bit of both. Sometimes it'll be a broker guy that he might get a few for himself and buy some for others. Mm-hmm. He might purely buy just for others, and then we have other farms just buy direct from us.
Yep.
So we're dealing with brokers and farmers.
So from your end, is there a lot of hoops to jump through to meet the Thai regulation, or is they're about getting business going?
It's all pretty easy to do. It's just it's expensive. The protocol for Thailand is quite expensive.
Yeah.
Quite detailed. Part of the live animal export in Canberra, where they help us greatly with issues with protocols and complying with import requirements.
Yep.
We have to get a number of dispensations for each time we export to Thailand, and the Canberra, the people in Canberra are great to chase that up for us.
Yeah, and one would hope so. It's a big industry for Australian agriculture. Full stop.
Yeah. It's look, what I do is, it's only a drip in the ocean. But it's still pretty important for those stud breeders to have another avenue to sell their cattle.
Oh, most definitely, and I would think that it would be a good argument being able to be put forward that it's it's certainly good for the Australian industry and good for beef cattle across the world because
I mean, if you look at the improvement of the genetic improvement in the Thai herd over the last 30 years, it's quite amazing, really. I mean, the little old sort of native or native cross with Bangladesh Brahmins that were there when I first went there to the cattle today. I mean, they're able to, with the Brahmins they've got today, they're able to sort of, rear their cattle and fatten them in a feedlot and be competitive with box meat from Australia.
Yeah.
And with through the free, Thailand's got a free trade agreement with Australia, and it's been a gradual. There's been no, the tariff's been low on the beef. There's been a quota, but over the time that quota will go. So we need the Thai farmer to have a chance to be to stay viable when it's open slather for Australian box meat to go in.
Yeah. Yep.
And the improvement in their genetics gives them half a chance to be that way.
That's right, and it's something that in a global industry, Australia certainly needs to be part of because we like to hang our hat on the preface that we're one of the leaders in the world of providing it, so we need to be part of it.
Yeah. I mean, we're not putting a lot of feeder steers into Thailand. There's a couple of shipments a year at the moment going.
Yeah.
But if we hadn't been in there over the last 30 years doing what we're doing, whether it's what I've done or Austrix has done or what AMLC's done, we wouldn't be sending feeder steers there today.
No, and probably not to lots of other parts of Asia either.
Yeah. Look, I think we've... Yeah, and another thing we're missing out on a bit today is, like back in the old AMLC days, we were mainly putting, experts on the ground there to help with extension, help the feedlots with nutrition and a lot of things. And they do more than just help the farm. They're there as foot soldiers to go and talk to the government officers when there's an issue. And I think we're missing not having that there these days.
Yeah, no. There's certainly it's certainly an interesting lifestyle and business you've carved out, Fraser.
That's fun.
I would imagine you could, like you said, you could tell lots of stories that probably don't need to be told in this forum, but it has been great to chat to you.
No, terrific.
And we will touch base, and like I said, Anastasia will catch up with you shortly.
Yeah, and we'll see. We'll check in a couple of years' time and see how it's all going in there.
We will definitely do that.